But for the people at home who have absolutely no idea what we would talk about when we say the Stoic sage, can you give us as brief or elaborate a definition as you can of what the Stoic sage is and maybe why it's important?
Of course. I would say that the Stoic sage is the yardstick. So a lot of people would have a "what would Jesus do" bracelet, or like something they would look at frequently. I would love to have "what would the sage do," because it's the ideal, right? It's the ideal, the person who has sufficiently gone through life in a very practical way, so they no longer commit a moral mistake. That doesn't mean they're all knowing, because they can't know everything. But they might know, for example, I don't know anything about the environment, so I'll go and speak to Kai because I know that Kai knows something about the environment and I trust his judgment. So that's them using their wisdom to go and find out other knowledge, for example. But if I'm talking about podcasts, I'm not going to go to Kai because he doesn't know anything, so I'll go to Simon. So it's somebody who's not all-knowing. Let me just get that straight. They are not all-knowing.
Yeah.
They are incapable of making a moral mistake or a moral misjudgment. So they could misjudge something they don't know about, but that would be unusual because they'd find somebody that would.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't make a moral mistake. So they wouldn't categorize something as, oh, that's terrible, that's really bad. For example, it's raining, that's bad. No, it's just raining. Like a sage would never say that rain is bad.
Yeah.
And it's terrible that weatherman or the weatherwoman says, oh, we have sun today, how wonderful. It's just sun or just rain, right? So the sage would be very practical and go, it's just raining. It's just raining really hard. Why is that bad? Yeah. Why is that? Under what circumstances is that bad? So that's the kind of question that the sage would ask.
So in other words, the sage has somewhat of like a perfect understanding of good, bad, and indifferent, right? Like that perfect understanding of what really affects us as human beings, what doesn't affect us, and what could be good or bad depending on how you look at it, right?
Exactly. So they would understand, like, in this circumstance, this would be good or this would be bad. So let's take the recent bushfires. Rain at that point would have been really good, right? But that would be qualified by the sage. They would qualify it. Say, it will be good because, and this will result in, maybe less problems with injustice because insurance companies don't want to pay out, because they call it an act of God, right? Yeah. But that would always be a qualified statement, and it would be very clear as to where they draw that line, right? So people think, okay, so he or she is not all-knowing. No, they're not all-knowing. So they're perfect, so they're sinless. Well, you have to remember in Stoicism there is no sin, right? The sin, as such, is to be a vicious person. So to act cowardly.
Yeah, the opposite of vice.
Unjustly, exactly.
The opposite of virtue.
So opposite of virtue, yes, to be greedy. So that's the sin, as it were. So they are a sinless person if we take it, only if we take sin to mean vice. So if you want to use the word sin because that aligns with like your religious tendencies or your inclinations, that's fine, as long as we are both aware that vice to me is sin. So if I'm being sinful as a Stoic, it would be because I'm acting or thinking viciously. So the sage is an ideal, as you've probably said on this podcast, and I think I've heard you say it. It's an ideal that's as rare as like the phoenix in actuality. So people say, okay, has the sage ever existed? Now I can't say yes or no, and that's to me not even relevant. To me, it's completely irrelevant if the sage existed or not, because I use the sage as a yardstick. I ask myself, not how do I become a better version of Kai? That's not the question I ask myself. I say, how can I be the best Kai I can be according to the sage?
Yeah.
Right? Because becoming a better version of myself, if I have a false impression, so if I misunderstand my nature and I think I should be a podcaster, then I think becoming a better version of myself is becoming more popular in my podcast. Right? Yeah. I laugh because I'm that bad at a podcast. It would be funny for me to do that. Let's say I had a conviction, I really believed that I should be a podcaster. Then becoming a better version of myself, according to my own criteria, would lead me down the wrong garden path. That doesn't mean that it's a bad path, in the sense that it's not necessarily vicious, although I would argue that wouldn't be very wise, right? Yeah. So I would argue it would be, but who knows? So it's something that you have to sit there and think. It's not just about being the best version of Simon or Kai or Jane or Paul or Pauline. It's really like, how can I be the best version of myself according to a higher set of standards? And these standards are not arbitrary, like, okay, because some god or Seneca said so, or Epictetus said so, which is why I'm very against just using quotes, because somebody said so.
Yeah.
Right? We have to, the sage would say, yes, Epictetus said this. Why did he say this? And what was the context in which he said it? And is the context that I'm currently sitting in something that can be aligned to the context that Epictetus was sitting in? So if he's talking about human nature, yes, of course. If he's talking about maybe more cultural things, like Massimo Rufus about, should I cut my beard, and to what extent is that having a beard useful, right? So he makes the argument, which is what part of the reason I have this beard, that we should have things that are useful. So I don't have a moustache because I find that it gets in the way, right? Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you should have a beard, because Massimo Rufus thinks that having a beard is very helpful when you're cutting away something that might be useful. Because you say, okay, well, what context was he in? Like, I mean, he probably didn't have central heating. I imagine that's probably quite true, unless he had the only form of central heating you would have would be a fire. Right? Yeah. So having a beard, I would say, would be pretty useful. Also, shaving would be much more dangerous. Yeah. If he cut himself, he would be infected. It would be much more difficult, especially as he was exiled, to get medical aid, right? Yeah. So I would say in his case, growing a beard is a very sensible thing to do, and just to remove what is unnecessary, because cutting oneself could become a massive unnecessary problem. So that's what I believe. Massimo Rufus says that. Why do I think he says about being vegetarian, eating locally? He would understand the food. If you transport food, there's a massive problem of hygiene back in the day. There's no refrigeration, right? So it makes no sense whatsoever, because you have this sort of pompous understanding of your own self, to say, I want food from 200 miles away or 200 kilometers away. Why would you do that? It would not be particularly safe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there is real common sense here. And I would argue that you yourself would also think the same if you had to rely on just boats, for example, to get food to Australia. You say, well, yeah, I will eat something that's been on the boat for 6 months. Yeah, that's a really good idea. If there's no refrigeration. Yeah. Or I will just eat salted fish because I know that is good for me. Yeah. So that's why I think that he was very fundamental about eating certain things is bad, because I would say under his understanding of the world and what was necessary for him, what was wise, was to eat locally. It's still wise for very different reasons. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. It's not hygienic reasons. Then eating else, otherwise would be vicious. Now we can dig deeper into that. I don't think it's necessary for this podcast, but you see what I mean? Like,